Hello and welcome to this graphite tip video. We're going to be drawing this cute little bunny. Now I've sketched out the outline, I'm going to start with the eye as I usually do, going in with an HB and then a much darker pencil and then blending between those layers to get a really good glassy beady look. I then start to add in a little bit of detail around the eye, following the direction of the fur, putting in the main details with a slightly darker pencil like a 6B, and then I'm mainly using the HB and the 2B to just map in where the darkest parts are. There's little partings within the fur, and these are just easier to map in to make sure that I know what I'm doing. I can use some of that graphite to blend with the blending stump into the lighter areas, the kind of mid-tones, and then blending all of those pencil strokes that I've just added to make a much softer look. I then go in with my HB again, blend in between. It's really important that you work in layers, and I can use that graphite over the rest of the face to give a much softer look. I then go in and add the lighter areas, the highlights, with the Tombow Mono eraser, and then I go in with the HB just to soften those eraser strokes, because you are kind of drawing with the eraser as well as the pencil, because you're pulling up the highlights, you're blending, and then you need to lift up those highlights again. Going in with the HB to add a little bit more detail around the edge of the bunny's head, because there was quite a lot of jaggedy fur, lots of partings in that area, so I'm going in with a slightly darker pencil, the 8B, and then blending in between again with the pencil stump. I'm going to go in with the Tombow in between just to soften those eraser marks and the pencil strokes, and using the graphite to work into the lighter midtones, and then adding a little bit more detail with the pencil again. I need to go in and just soften those pencil strokes. They're a little bit big, a little bit too much parting, so I'm going in with a very light hand, again following the direction of the fur and adding the pencil strokes in just to soften everything and to work in between those clumps of fur. Just building up to the second layer and adding the midtones in with the pencil, adding some long pencil strokes at the top of the fur and then softening with the Tombow, going back in with the pencil, adding the layers, and then we can blend with the pencil stump and push some of that graphite into the next part of the drawing just to soften all of the edges, going in and darkening up some areas with a 6B and then softening the outlines with the Tombow, because we want the fur to look realistic. We don't want it to look too harsh and too kind of pencily, too crayony. Always blending with the blending stump in between, or the tortillon, and then we can add some of that graphite that we've picked up and add it to the other areas. Darkening with the 8B and then lifting up with the Tombow. There's lots of layers that need to keep being done, so if you feel like you're taking up just as much as you're putting down sometimes, but actually that's what gives that depth and the texture to the fur. Adding all of the little fur details, following the direction with the pencil, and then blending with the pencil stump in between. Darkening up with the HB into the darkest parts in between the clumps of fur, so we've got those lovely partings showing, and then I can blend with the pencil blending stump and then lift up the highlights with the Tombow Mono. So repeating this process. This neck area had quite a lot of detail, so I had to go back and forth and keep blending, keep lifting, and then adding the detail in between, and you end up with a much softer look. Softening the edges with the Tombow as well, and then we can go back in with the HB pencil, the 2B and the 8 or 9B in the really darkest parts, softening the edges with the Tombow, lifting up those highlights again, and then just adding a little bit. Now we've darkened that neck area, we can go back in and darken up the face, adding the detail to the lighter areas of the bunny, making sure that we can still see texture of the fur, and we're blending in between with the paper stump or the tortillon, just to soften everything and to push that graphite around into the lighter mid-tones. Adding a little bit of detail around the eye, making sure that we've got the shape correct. I think that needed a little bit more, and then adding some detail into the face with the HB and the 6B when we need to darken up, softening those pencil strokes with the Tombow, and then we're going to go into the lighter areas. There's still some dark hairs that show in the lighter areas, making sure the nose is the right shape and as dark as it needs to be, as well as the whiskered area. Going in with the 8B now into the darkest shadows, darkening up some more, adding some little fur textures, darkening up in the ears. We need to make sure that's the darkest part as well as the eye, and then just adding some fur detail with the Tombow and just making sure the highlights are in the right place with the Tombow as well. Going back in with the pencil and then blending with the tortillon or paper stump, just fixing some of the areas that look a little bit too clumpy, and then we can go in with the 6B into the body and start to add the rest of the fur. We can add little sketchy lines and then blend with the blending stump to push that graphite into the rest of the body. Just obviously you're going to be softening some of those pencil strokes, so we need to add a little bit more and darkening up in certain areas, making sure you're blending in between, using the Tombow to lift up any highlights that we've spotted. Now we've got the body in, it's a little bit easier to see where other areas need to be darkened and where a little bit more detail needs to be added. I wanted the face to be the main focus on this one, so the body is a little bit more blurred out, but we still need to add a little bit of detail to make sure that it doesn't look unfinished. Going in with the Tombow to pick up the highlights and soften those pencil strokes, and you can see the texture is starting to build by working up through the layers, blending in between, adding the pencil, softening with the blending stump, lifting up the highlights with the tortillon or paper stump, and then going back in with the pencil again to pull it all together so it's much more cohesive. Darkening up where you need to with the 8B or the 9B, especially at the bottom here. It's actually on a person's hand, this, so there's quite a lot of shadow at the bottom and there was quite a lot of shadow at the top. Making sure it's as dark as it needs to be in all of the areas. You can see that texture in the body now. Just adding a little bit more detail to the face and around the neck to make sure that that blends in nicely. It doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, and the shadows are as dark as they need to be. Lifting up a few highlights around the back where the light would pick up on the back of the bunny, and just softening some of the darker areas. Darkening up a little bit more around the face and the ear. Making sure you're using a light hand and following the direction of the fur, filling in any gaps that are missing in the lightest parts, and then we're just going to add in the little feet, pushing that graphite to fill in any gaps, and then just going back in with the detail that has been blending out a little bit. Darkening up at the bottom, using the Tombow Mono just to lift up some of the highlighted areas and soften the pencil strokes around the fur, giving a nice natural finish, and then blending in between as well. There's the finished bunny. Of course, you could keep going back in and adding more and more layers to soften the fur, but I wanted to leave it here. It's about an hour and a half's work, and there's the finished bunny. I look forward to seeing you next time.